I think that business owners that tend to do better also take care of the people around them. And they take care of their employees, for instance. They pay their employees well because they understand it's better that I pay my employees better, and they have more loyalty towards the company and to you as an individual than trying to beat up your employees on salary.
Hey, it's Bootstrapped Unicorns. Welcome to another episode. I am Josh Pies, the chief attention getter, and I'm so grateful that you're here. So I'm going to introduce you to somebody today that you as an entrepreneur, or the entrepreneurial minded, as we often say here, might not have thought you needed to know. Maybe you didn't even know this type of person exists. But I will tell you, as a business owner myself, I'm realizing it's really important for me to listen to Jim as much as I can so that eventually my business can grow to a point that it has salable value. So Jim Parker, my guest today, is one of the partners at the Boss Group, and they sell people's businesses. They can help people buy businesses too. I think we talk more about selling than buying, but he has a lot of wisdom when it comes to what makes a good business, what makes a bad business, what makes a business able to be sold. Why would somebody want to buy a business? Why would somebody want to sell a business? These are questions that you're probably in your day-to-day and not asking yourself, but you kind of need to. So just settle in, maybe even get a notepad. Maybe you're going to watch this episode a couple of times because you're going to get some knowledge here that you need. Jim, I'm so glad you're here. I love hanging out with you.
Josh, I do too. Thanks for having me on, buddy. I appreciate it.
So great. That was a great episode. Thanks, everybody. No, I'm kidding. So Jim, when we started hanging out together, I had always known that there is something called mergers and acquisitions. Mm-hmm. I'd always known that there's something called, just buying a business or having a business broker. These are things that weren't foreign to me. I like business movies, so every once in a while you'll see that, and it's just not something that I ever spent time focusing on. So I feel like, I have been unprepared until now to be even a better entrepreneur because I'm not preparing myself to have something that has a type of value that could be sold. And so this is a good thing for me. And I think we need to learn about what it even means. Like, what is a business broker? What do you do? And I suppose, why do you do it from the personal why, but why does this world need business brokers?
Okay. Well, there's a lot of questions in that one.
I know, because I'm going to get quiet here and just sip my soda.
So I think one of the questions was, what do we do? Is a business broker? What is a business broker?
What is a business broker?
Okay, so a business broker is somebody that helps a small business owner sell their business once they want to exit. So, a lot of times the business owners that I work with, they're looking to retire, or, they're going through a divorce, and for some reason with a divorce they need to sell, or maybe their spouse got offered a job out of state and they're going to move and they're going to relocate and they need to sell their business. Sometimes it's, unfortunately a passing or an illness is a reason why a business owner needs to sell. So the business owner spends years building up this great successful business, and it's earned them a really good income, but then they get to a point they're like, and sometimes it's burnout, by the way, 7 to 10 years is the average burnout for a business owner.
Really?
But they get to a certain point and they're like, for some reason they don't no longer want to own that business. What are they going to do? Just walk away? So that's their opportunity that they can sell their business. They can cash out, get some chips off the table, and somebody else can come along and acquire that business and continue growing it.
So in any of those stories, you've got somebody who suddenly realizes, and it's probably a suddenly. I'm guessing.
Usually,
yeah.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like that story told me that I've been planning for this for 6 years.
Yeah. Unless they're going to retirement. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense because you do plan for that a little bit more. As you're approaching this rapidly, who puts the price tag on something like this? Because I know entrepreneurship tends to end up being very personal. Mm-hmm. And I predict right now you're going to tell me that a lot of owners overinflate the price of their business because it feels so personal. Who's pricing a business? What goes into putting a price on a business?
Well, end of the day, when you boil it all down, the value of the business comes down to what a seller is willing to sell it for and a buyer is willing to buy it for. That's what it comes down to. But as a business broker, what I'm looking at is doing what we call recasting the financials of the business owner. Because business owners are trying to reduce their tax liability. The sellers, the business owners, CPA is trying to reduce the tax liability on their
Right.
financials. So what I'm doing is I'm unwinding all that to see what somebody really could make from that business, and then I'm looking at other businesses in the same industry, in the same size, and seeing what they have sold for. So we can get an idea of these are what all the other businesses have sold for in the same industry and the same particular size. And that's where we get a multiplier, and we multiply that times the amount of money that they're making bottom line after we unwind everything that they're doing, if that makes sense.
So I know on my taxes every year, there's things that are, legitimate tax avoidance, not evading, but I don't want to pay for things that I can write off.
Right.
And so you're taking things and looking clearly at write-offs and all of the tax maneuvers that pros do.
Mm-hmm. And seeing how much the business is really making a business owner.
Got it.
At the end of the day. I mean, let's just take some simple things real quick. So, obviously you got the net profit of the business.
Right.
And so we take the net profit and we're going to add back to it your salary. If you're a smaller business, if there's a bigger business, I don't want to get too in detail, it may not be. But I'm talking about the smaller businesses that will sell usually for a few $1 million and under. Take the net profit plus the owner's salary. If you've got loans on your business, maybe you took some business loans out, well, you're going to be paying those loans off when you go to sell your business. The buyer's going to take over the business free and clear. So the interest payments that you're making on those loans will not exist for the buyer, so we can add that back. Maybe you're taking non-cash expenses like depreciation and amortization. It's a non-cash expense. We're going to add back that in its entirety. Maybe you have a one-time expense. You have a lot of equipment in this studio right now, Josh, and maybe you bought a lot of that equipment in this current year. Well, it's a one-time expense. A lot of this equipment looks like it'll last quite a while because it's good equipment.
Sure.
So that's not an expense that a new buyer is going to see for many years down the road, so we can add that back. Maybe you're running your health insurance through your company. Maybe you've got a 401k or a SEP for you personally. And obviously, we can't add back the employees,
right?
In retirement programs, but yours personally we can add back. And maybe you have some discretionary expenses that are, maybe you have some meals and entertainment or some travel in there that isn't really at the end of the day needed for business purposes. We can add that back. So we're trying to take all these different expenses.
That company retreat that spent an odd amount of time on a golf course.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Yep.
And we're coming up with that bottom line. And but you made a comment about a lot of business owners, get emotional and they inflate the business. I see it all the time.
Right.
And you got to, if you're really thinking about you're selling your business, you've got to be realistic on what your business is really worth at the end of the day.
Well,
the market's already been tested. That's what we're looking at, is businesses comparable to that business and seeing what they sold for.
Well, and you said something that reminded me of like a real estate appraisal where, a realtor will have to, well, actually, it's not really a realtor, it's an appraiser, goes and has comparables that are, you've got a 2-car garage, they had a 2-car garage. You got a 2,000 square foot house, well, they got a 2,100 square foot house and it sold for this. So you got to take 100 square feet and do a little math and figure it out. And so they're doing comparables. Are you doing that?
Kind of. It's a little bit similar, but not exactly like that. But it's the same kind of wavelength.
Okay.
When we're doing it.
Where do you get that data? How does anybody know what a business sold for?
Well, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of different databases that we belong to. There's 4 or 5 different databases that we belong to.
Okay.
We pay an annual membership to those to belong to those databases, so we have access to that information.
Interesting. So,
and each database, by the way, Josh, is a little bit different. Sometimes those sold databases include the inventory was included in the sale. Sometimes the inventory was not included in the sale. Sometimes some of the databases will allow certain add backs, and some databases will not allow other databases. So it's not even like I could give a list of these databases, and first of all, it costs a lot of money for somebody to belong to them, but then two, you really need to know how those databases are set up.
Interesting. So is there ever a time with a business where you look at it and go, yeah, nobody's going to buy that, or yeah, it's not ready to be sold, or maybe the opposite, holy cow, this is a gem, it's ready to be sold and I can market it? Like, how do you evaluate not just the price, but the condition or the salability or the viability of a business?
Yeah, that's a good question. It happens quite a bit where I'm talking to a business owner and it happens in one of those buckets that you're talking about.
Okay.
One being that, the business is not sellable at all. It's too small of a business. It's not making enough money. And at the end of the day, if somebody's making only 20 grand from the business, it's not enough to live off of.
Right.
So it's not going to be sellable. Or it could be a situation where the business owner is the business. You take a one person, the business owner is an interior decorator, and they have no employees. People are using that interior decorator because of their design skills and their talent. Yeah. It's very hard to sell a one-person interior design for that reason. So, those are the kind of things we're looking on that. And then there's other situations that I look at, or throw one more at you. Let's say they have one client or two clients that make up 100% of the revenue. It's going to be too much of a risk for a buyer because, buyers are going to look at it and go, I'm going to buy that business, but boy, if I lose that one client 2 months after I take over the business, I've lost 80% of my business.
Right.
So we have to worry about that client concentration. By the way, if you are a business owner and you have one or two clients or any clients that make up more than 15% of your business, you should really be worried about the client concentration. Even if you're not looking to sell your business, you should look at it because it's not good for you, it's not good for your family, it's not good for your employees, it's not good for your employees' family. You want to diversify so you're not in that situation. And I've seen that where people don't have their business up for sale and they got one client and they lose that one client and all of a sudden their business is down 50%. So you want to make sure you have diversified clientele. And I'm not talking about go out and fire your biggest client or two. I'm just saying as you expand your business, expand it in a way that you have a more mixture of a clientele.
That makes sense. Yeah. So, keep that client, keep the cash flow, but grow in a direction where, and it sounds almost maybe dangerous to grow, if you've got a whale and you're serving that whale, landing whale number 2 might take all the same infrastructure and all the same people. So basically you have two businesses serving two whales. Yeah. And in either point,
you might want to have one, not instead of having that one other big whale, maybe have 5 or 6
guppies.
Smaller. Yeah, guppies. That's a good way to put it. That's a great way to put it.
Surround your whales with guppies.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
And I see also another bucket you were talking about was maybe they're not quite ready to sell.
Yeah.
And that happens. And usually, sometimes it happens where I'm like, you're not ready to sell at all. You've got a great business, but you need to work on this, and that before you actually go to sale. And then there's other times I look at it and go, you got a great business. It is sellable right now, but boy, if you waited a year and you did this or you did that, you could probably maximize your sales price. So we're looking at that type of a situation as well.
Interesting. So it sounds like the variables are probably too many to say, hey, business owner who's watching this, prepare your business with these elements because that'll help you get ready for sale. But are there common things that you run into where maybe a business is eventually sellable, on the way to sellable, maybe currently sellable, but maybe grow into that better version? What are the things where you're like, almost always we have to help them with this, almost always we have to do that? Is there a list like that?
Yeah, I would say financials. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of things. I've actually, as you're aware, I have a podcast going on that breaks down each one of these and each one go. But real quick for your viewership, the financials is probably the most critical. Sometimes I see business owners using their business account as a personal account. And they're making all their personal expenses are being run through the business. They're paying their mortgage payments, they're paying their car payments, but mortgage payments and kids' college education, and every little expense they do, they run it through the business. And when you go to sell your business, you've got to have cleaner financials. So you got to clean that up. But if you are doing that, again, even if you're not looking to sell your business, you should not run your business like that. I mean, number one, you can get in a lot of trouble with the business. you know?
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, if you're doing that, you're probably not even properly categorizing your line items.
Yeah.
Because you're probably that person who's like, yeah, I do a little work at my house. That's 100% write-off. And, and Uncle Sam is not going to be happy
Right.
about those things. Are there other things that you run into with a business where you're like, beyond financials, also work on these things?
Yeah, and I don't know if a current owner, if this would apply, but one of the issues that I'm just coming off the top of my head because I'm dealing with the situation right now with a business owner that I'm working with to take to the market. They've actually got three owners at the business. So, there's nothing wrong with. But when you go to sell, a buyer's going to come along and is going to look at that and go, now I've got to replace not just the owner, but I got to replace 2 other owners. So on day one, I could potentially have a big brain drain. So when I'm working with business owners, like the one company I'm working with right now, it's a great business. They've owned it for 20 plus years. There's 3 business owners. But first time I met with them about 6 months ago, that was one of the issues. And we looked at that and said, okay, we need to create a situation where a buyer's not going to feel like there's going to be a brain drain when they acquire the business. So the 2 of the owners are working a lot less. They're at the point where they're each working about 20, 25 hours a week. So one new buyer could replace both of them. And then the third person, they are actually in the process right now of interviewing somebody to take over that person's role so that when we do take it to the market, the employee situation's good.
Got it. So the buyer will walk into a situation where there is a leader who's an employee who will stay on. Do you ever do
or
anything?
at least knows that particular job.
Yeah. Do you ever do anything where it's written into the contract that the former owner stays engaged for XYZ months or years?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. When you sell a business, typically it's 2 to 4 weeks of the seller training the buyer on how to operate the business is included in the asking price.
But only 2 to 4 weeks.
Only 2 to 4 weeks of it actually be included with no additional cost. And then if it's over a month, then the seller should be willing to stay aboard to help with that transition and to train the buyer, but that should be compensated. So whether it's 3 more months on top of that, 6 more months on top of that, 1 year on top of that, there's some compensation going on.
Is that pre-negotiated? So
yeah, that's
if you bridge past the 4 weeks, you're walking into a fee.
Yeah, a lot of times the buyer will be like, hey, it's going to take me about 6 months. I feel like I'll be comfortable about after 6 months. These are larger businesses. Sure. These aren't I'm not talking about your ice cream shop. I'm talking large businesses that might sell for a couple $1 million. The buyer might be like, it'll take me about 6 months to feel comfortable. Well, 1 month would be usually included. And so we've got another 5 months, and we have that written in the contract. Seller will be, continuing on with the operation, for X amount of months at X amount of pay, it's written in there. And then sometimes it's also a consultation type thing too. So maybe the first 6 months, the owner's there or the seller's there to train the buyer and they're being compensated. And then maybe for the next 6 months, they're paying them a monthly retainer to just do consultation by phone and things like that.
I would imagine, especially with the larger businesses, when the owners had so many relationships, you are probably later uncovering the only person who knows Joe at this other business is the guy who just sold me the business. So we need to call Joe back in to rekindle the relationship. That's if we ever sold.
Yeah.
I've got 20 some odd years of relationship building in
you need to
multiple
transition.
states.
You need to transition that relationship from the seller to the buyer. Absolutely. Right. And the thing is, Josh, there's so many different things that we need to look at when we're selling the business to make it a successful transition. And what I call it is an assessment call. So that's one of the things that we do is we do an assessment call with the business owner to look at what kind of things the buyers would be concerned about, what kind of obstacles might be in place, and what skeletons are there, and try to figure out, an approach on how we're going to handle that before we go to the market. Because it's always better to know that before you go to the market and then go to the market and be reactive. I'd rather be proactive.
Interesting. So when you say go to the market, and I've got a film and TV background, we have these markets you can go to where you could show up with a treatment or a script or a movie, and you can try to sell it at market. There's one in Miami, there's one in LA, and you literally go, they rent out an entire hotel, and you can go hotel room to hotel room and try to hawk your wares.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's
That's
a really
kinda
interesting.
cool.
It's very cool.
Have you done it?
I've got friends who've done it on my behalf. I
That's
haven't.
cool.
Yeah, I usually am either on a project or I'm with family, and just flying to a place to try to hawk my wares never felt like something I want to do. But yeah, I've been involved in it tangentially, and it's a neat thing. And so when I hear you taking it to market, unfortunately for me, that's the picture that's in my head, which sounds probably completely inaccurate from what you're doing when you take it to market. What does that mean?
Going to the market means, we're putting the business out there for sale.
Okay.
But the thing is, this is the thing about my industry, like most people that sell things for a living, they are like, hey, everybody, look what I've got. You want it. Business owners that hire us don't want anybody to know their business is for sale.
Oh, wait, you're rocking the boat with customers.
Yeah, you don't want employees to know the business is for sale because they'll be like, hey, am I still going to have a job? When the person buys it. You got to worry about customers, like you said. Customers be like, hey, do I really want to go to that business? There might be something wrong with it because it's for sale, because a lot of people think that if a business is for sale, there's something wrong with it. You got to worry about vendors and suppliers, because a vendor and supplier might be like, I don't know if you're going to be here next week. So am I going to have terms with you? I'm going to start having to do COD, and that could hurt the cash flow of the business moving forward. And obviously, you don't want competitors to know, because they could use that against you. So we do it in a very, very confidential way. We put enough information out there for potential buyers to look at it and go, I like that business, but they don't know, they can't guess which business it is in particular. So we keep it very general.
Does it move to like an NDA level at some point when somebody starts getting
Absolutely,
interested?
yeah. So what we do is we'll pre-screen that buyer. We need them to sign a confidentiality agreement. We want to understand what kind of financial situation they're in, whether we get them that, send over a personal financial net worth statement, or, copies of their bank accounts, with their account numbers, scratched out, obviously. Sure. Driver's license, passport, if we don't feel comfortable, we know who we're talking to. And obviously, education, experience, and background that's required. And if the business requires a certain particular license to operate, do they have that license, or are they in the position where they're close to being able to obtain that license?
So like in Florida, to be a general contractor, you have to be licensed. So if a general contracting company were on the market, after clearing a whole bunch of other hurdles, like can you afford it, and are you really who you say you are, and did you sign the NDA, we also need to make sure that they could get the license or participate in the license.
How far away are you from being able to meet the criteria that you can get the license?
Wow.
And so licensing issues can be a big part too.
Wow, as part of me has this like image of you being clandestine in a trench coat and like having like walk, you're in a park and you have to drop the briefcase by the seat, and binoculars, making sure the right person picks it up. So it's not quite that, but it's interesting how secretive, because I'm blessed to be in a position in a business where I can be like, hey, we do a thing and you can buy it. Hey, I can sell it on a street corner if I had to.
Right.
It's business to business sales in my world, so you don't quite do that, but there's no secretive nature to it. I can't imagine taking something to market by not being able to talk about it openly.
Yeah.
That's a really fascinating thing. So how does a would-be buyer discover this opportunity to ask you questions about said secret business?
Oh, how do we get that information in front of them?
Yeah.
Well, we've got a database at Boss Group that is, and I don't want to disclose the number in a public forum, but we have a very, very, very large database of buyers that have reached out to our company in the past about business opportunities. We've been in business for quite a while, and we operate differently than most brokerage companies. Most brokerage companies, everybody is a complete individual. Where we work, name of our company's Boss Group, so we've got there's a group of us, and we kind of work as a group, but we work individually as well. And there's some things that we do on our own. There's some things that we share. And one of the things that we share is all of our information goes into one central database, where a lot of companies, each agent has their own like little tiny database of buyers. So we've always done this. We have a very, very, very large database of buyers. That's one of the first things that we comb through. Then we also have external type of databases that we have access to. Like we've got a private equity group database, I think 3,000 or 4,000 private equity group names in there.
Wow.
That could be potential buyers. And then obviously we're doing some marketing and advertising, and we're getting that out. We do co-broke with other brokers. And so we belong to a co-brokering association, and we have an MLS through there, kind of like the Realtor Association has an MLS system where real estate agents can see it. Other brokers can see the businesses for sale that other brokers have for sale. So if they have a buyer and I have a seller, and they're searching it, and they're like, oh, I found it. Plus, I talk to brokers constantly. I mean, that's
Sure.
what I do for a living. So, it's not just a matter of, if you're another broker and we're working on a transaction and I'm about to bring something else to the market, I might be like, hey, Josh, I've got a great HVAC business that I'm about to bring to the market in 2 weeks. This is what the gross sales are. This is what the discretionary earnings are. Do you have any buyers for that? And you might be like, I just talked to a guy a month ago that was looking for something like that. And so that natural type of a situation like that happens too. So this is what I do for a living. Is large part of it is matching those people up.
Yeah, it's like trading cards.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I got a Babe Ruth and a Mickey Mantle. I got a Ricky Henderson
What do you got?
second year
this.
card. Yeah. Here's my Bo Jackson. Okay, that's cool.
I'm from Pittsburgh, so I have no good players in my hand.
I'm sorry.
Nobody good on the Pirates. I'm sorry. Kidding.
Yeah, well, so you've aligned with a Phillies guy too. That's interesting.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, my partner's a Phillies guy.
Yeah. So, short story: when his business partner had his most recent baby, I sent him a Philadelphia Phillies onesie so that he could train his child in the way he ought to go.
Brainwash him.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So, I don't think any onesies are in your future, but if I need to send some Pittsburgh Pirates hats to your kids, let me know.
Only Steelers stuff.
Oh yeah, Steelers. Yeah. How are they doing this year?
We should talk about something else.
I'm sorry. Anyhow, I'd say, I wish I followed more sports. It's just when you got the business the way I've got it, I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah.
I start watching sports and I glaze over because I'd rather be, if I'm going to be spending time that's not directly with my wife and kids, I'd rather be working on
I'm not a
business.
sports fan. I only watch the Steelers, and that's
Okay.
it. I don't watch any other football. I don't watch any other team. Like I don't.
So it's just your hometown team.
Yeah, I don't consider myself even a football fan. I consider myself just a Steelers fan. Josh, I've talked to you about your podcast before, and I know you've got like a lot of business owners out there, and I realize that a lot of business owners out there are not ready to sell their business.
No, I think most of them get into business with that never being a thought.
Right.
And they live with it not being a thought.
And I'm sure there is people out there that are listening because this is a cool statistic. 40% of all business owners were born before 1964.
Really?
40% of all business owners in the United States were born before 1964.
So 40% are pretty much ready to
That's
sell.
the baby
whether they do
boomer
it or not.
generation. Yeah, they're looking to retire. I mean, we're looking at the greatest transfer of personal financial wealth the world has ever seen. But I know the people that are listening that are business owners. Maybe we can touch a little bit about what I've seen out there, because I've seen a lot of good businesses, great businesses. I've seen some bad businesses, and
well, okay. Well, let's stay right there. So you just said good, great, bad. Well, let's two buckets: bad businesses and good businesses. What are you seeing, and what's the differentiation?
I think there's a bunch of different things. The bad businesses. I think the first thing is, and I'm not going to say bad. I shouldn't say bad, but not as successful businesses. I think a lot of us that go into business for ourselves, we're both business owners. We go into business for ourselves because we have faith in ourselves, and we have a lot of confidence, and et cetera, et cetera. But sometimes it goes too far, and the business owner thinks they know everything, and they know everything. And I think that really stumps somebody's growth in business. The successful business, the businesses that I see that do the best, the small businesses, the business owner has a different mentality. They are listening to their advisors, whether they're their financial advisors, their legal advisors, a business coach, but they're reaching out to other people because they realize, I know a lot of stuff, but I don't know everything about everything. You know what I mean? Like, there's none of us that are great at everything. I might be great at this, and that. I might be good at this, and that, and I'm really bad at that.
Right.
And you need that advisors, and it also goes towards your employees. When I hire employees, I see sometimes business owners want to not hire anybody that's smarter than them. I would rather hire people that are smarter than me. And the employees that I have right now, I don't want to say they're smarter than me, but they're a good balance to me. Because I am really good at big picture stuff. I'm really good at that kind of a thing. There's other good qualities about me, but I'm not the most detailed person. So I got people in my staff that's what they excel at. And so that's the kind of counterbalance that you want with your employees.
It reminds me a little bit of the politics aside, but the model that a president would have a group of chiefs of staff who are all so expert and so much smarter in their lane than the president ever could be. So you're surrounding yourself with strong, confident people, confident in their lane, so that the president can be, the buck will stop with them, but the great ideas and decisions that are, rooted in the strengths of those verticals are all delegated.
And that's a perfect example, because if you're looking at like the president of the United States, not anyone in particular, I don't want to get into politics, and they have all these advisors in front of them. I'm not saying that the business owners should take everything they say golden. What you do is you listen to all your advisors, and you take in their information and you make the decision yourself. But you're hearing different people's point of view when you make that decision, and I think that's a successful situation. Another thing I see too is I think that business owners that tend to do better also take care of the people around them, and they take care of their employees. For instance, they pay their employees well, because they understand it's better that I pay my employees better, and they have more loyalty towards the company and to you as an individual than trying to beat up your employees on salary. And then they're gone in 6 months. The best employees are the ones that are there the longest they can possibly, the longer the employee's there, the better they usually are, because they get more knowledgeable in what they're doing. They understand the culture of the business more. They kind of can start thinking like the owner of the business and start making decisions that way. So long-term employees is critical to a good growth with a business. And that comes down to taking care of them financially, but also I think in business, in small business, you can't run it like a corporate world where you got this whip and you're whipping people and yelling at people and screaming at people, and you see this in the movies, and like how Steve Jobs ran Apple, and how Elon Musk runs his thing. You're a small business owner. It's more like family. It's more like friends. You talk business, but you also talk personal stuff. You get to know each other, and I think that plays a good equation. And it comes down to your vendors and suppliers. I recently, we engaged with each other. So I look at you as a key component as a supplier. Well, when you gave me a quote on what we needed to do, I never once said, will you cut down 10% or 20% or 15%? Because I'm a firm believer, and I'm looking at other business owners that are successful. You don't beat up your suppliers. You don't beat up the people that are helping you do that, because you want to be a client that those people look at and go, they're a really good client for me. And not look at them and be like, oh, they're a pain in the butt client. Right. They cost, they don't pay that much, and there's always problems, and they're always yelling and they're always screaming. You want to be like, you want your suppliers to be like, oh my gosh, I get paid what I think I'm worth, and I am, they treat me nice, they treat me fairly, we work together, it's a collaborative thing, and that way, when something does pop up, and you need something done at the last minute, or you need a favor, they're more willing to do it.
That supplier's going to be on it because there's respect.
And it's just treating people well. And again, we're talking small business. We're not talking Walmart and Amazon, Walmart, where you're trying to get the lowest cost of goods as you possibly can. We're talking small business. That
brings up an interesting question. At what point, and it's hard to ask, but is it ever okay, or at what point does it become okay to flip from caring well for your vendors, caring well for your suppliers and your employees, and having that family atmosphere, to going full Elon and telling your best PhDs that they got to work 85 hours a week because you got to launch an ugly truck? Just sorry, it's ugly. It reminds me of a DeLorean. DeLorean didn't last. Yours is not going to go back in time. I'm sorry. But it's just, you hear the horror stories of the hard-working environment right now. And interestingly, like, you got to respect Elon's organization to a degree. They're doing things nobody else is doing.
Oh, they're amazing.
They're amazing. Yeah. And they're also the biggest target on the block right now, so they're easy to pick on. And so,
he's built something. I mean, like, I'm not comparing myself to Elon. I mean, obviously he's
Yeah.
a better business person. I'll never own a company even a smidgen of what he's got. I'm
Sure.
just talking about how people are treated.
no, and I'm with you on it fully, but I just wonder, and maybe we don't have an answer to a question like this, but at some point, obviously, like Walmart became Walmart, but at some point it was the Walton family with their store. And Elon, I don't know his trajectory. He got to PayPal and then he harvested PayPal and now he owns the world and does crazy things. But we know that there's a lot of hard working demands in their business that, I mean, let's face it, the people who are saying yes to it are accepting it. They're taking it and saying, yes, more, sir, may I have another, sir? And in some way, somewhere, some of that must be okay. Maybe, probably not all of it. But is there ever a point where you go, oh, that business has grown to the point where they're going to have to flip a switch and become a little bit more Machiavellian with their intentions with suppliers and vendors?
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm personally comfortable with my business ever getting to that point. But obviously the big ones with the big numbers have gotten there at some point. What is that dynamic? Why does that happen?
Well, you got to remember, typically, and I'm not talking about the examples that we've been using so far, but typically an entrepreneur that starts a business from scratch and they build that business and they turn it into a nationally known, household name that's really big. Again, I'm not using examples of it now, but they've grown it really, really big. Let's take Facebook, for example. Zuckerberg did not start that in his dorm and then grew it to this major company by himself. You get to a point where you've grown the business pretty big, but to take it to the next level, you need a lot of money and an influx of money to come in to take it to the next level. You need more talent to take it to the next level. And so, that's where you go and you start, selling off some of your stock in exchange to raise capital to grow your business. Plus, usually those people, whether it's an angel investor or a private equity group or whatever it might be, they're coming in not just with the money, but they're coming in with, support to help grow that business.
Right.
And then, you get to that level. Like, I'll tell you, in my world, like, I might sell a business, for $4 or $5 million or $7 million to a private equity group. Well, that private equity group comes in and takes that business. What they're doing now is they're trying to build that business up and build it even bigger because they want to sell it in 5 years from now and they want to turn a profit for themselves and their investors. Well, they're going to build it up to maybe 20 million and sell it to a bigger private equity group. And that private equity group builds it up and they sell it on. And then you get to invest.
Else. So maybe that's where we start introducing that concept that the family vibe that you get with a small business and their suppliers and vendors starts turning into being something maybe a little bit more transactional because you're watching the bottom line in a different way.
And I think, and I'm not saying don't look at the bottom line, and I'm not saying that you don't negotiate with your suppliers and vendors. I mean, sometimes suppliers and vendors are, they're trying to make as much money as they possibly can. Sure. I'm not saying that you don't negotiate with them. I'm just saying you don't want to beat them up to a point where you're a pain in the butt client, between you're not paying them very much and you're so demanding and, you think that, they owe you something, it's part of business that you might need to negotiate.
That makes sense.
Your situation is a little bit different because yours coming. You're not selling me a product. You're selling me your brain power. So. But I think that's a big thing. Is just treating people around you is good. And that's what I see this more successful business owners doing. Another thing that I see as well, and this was the problem with my first business that I owned. My first business that I owned, we would have a problem. And we would resolve that problem with the customer, me and my partners, and we would move on. But we would not fix why the problem happened.
Oh.
So we're just kind of putting a Band-Aid on things.
Right. So the problem could happen again.
Yeah, it could. But it could be a small problem. But you're like, okay, I'll fix it, blah, blah, blah. But you didn't really address why that problem happened. And then there's another problem that comes up maybe a couple weeks later. And you don't, you fix that problem, but you don't fix why that problem happened. And then you do that for 5 years. And you end up, the whole company's built around Band-Aids. And you might have this beautiful house. Let's take the business analogy of a house being the business. Beautiful house. But the foundation is just a mess and it's about to crumble. And something comes along and then everything collapses. So when I learned that from my first business, because that's what we did. We just Band-Aided things together. I mean, we took care of the customers and clients and made things right, but we didn't fix those things that caused those problems. And that's what ended up happening. They start, all those little things that happen, they start to come together. And before you got this, because at the end of the day, we had a pretty big company. It was pretty successful, but there were so many little problems. And so when I started Boss Group, years later, I had already been doing business brokerage for about 10 years. That was a thing, and that's what I told my employees, that if we ever have a problem, and you're always going to have problems in business. I mean, that's part of business. We can't just fix the problem, but we got to fix the underlying issue, why that problem happened to begin with, and we have to put something in place. And that kind of leads to the next thing I wanted to talk about is systems and procedures.
Yeah.
And having great systems and procedures in your business is just, it's critical. It's critical. Don't reinvent the wheel every single day. If you do this task today and you do this task in the afternoon, and you do the task 5 times a week, what's the most efficient way that task can be done? And create just all the way around. Like, think about your systems and procedures and tighten them up and make them really good and as detailed as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And I know you've heard this analogy before, Josh, and I'm gonna probably bore you with it, but I love it because this is how I live in my business, and I'm not saying my business is perfect. I think it's pretty good, but it's not perfect. But it's always the matter of keep trying to improve. And that's the attitude, is keep trying to improve your business. But there was a in the night, and I don't know if this story's true or not. I repeat it a lot because I love the story, but at the end of the day, I don't know if it's true. But I don't care if it's true or not. It's the meaning behind it, I think, that's important. And so how it goes is that in the 1970s, there was a Japanese company that made a car muffler, that was the best in the industry. And an American company wanted to see why their muffler was so great. So they did reverse engineering. And reverse engineering is when you take apart a competitor's product, see how it's put together, and you can identify how it's doing. So they bought the Japanese muffler and they took it apart and they looked at the muffler and they're like, these engineers are like, I don't know why this muffler is better than our muffler, because it's got all the same parts as our muffler does. There's no difference. And they couldn't figure out why the muffler was that much better. But then they started looking at every little tiny detail of that muffler, down to the washers and the screws. And they realized just every little thing in that muffler was just a little bit better than their muffler. But when you put it all together, it was exponentially better. And so sometimes as business owners, we're looking for that one or two big ideas to separate us from our competitors. And sometimes we're in an industry like mine where you're not going to really come up with one or two big things that are going to really separate you from the competition. But it's just every little thing that you do and every little thing that you handle, the way you handle things, is just a little bit better. But when you put it all together, it's exponentially better.
That's really cool.
Did I ever tell you that story?
I think you have told me that story, and you can tell it to me again too. Because it's stories like that though that they stick, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and we business owners get so stuck, and I know you live this too. We go, there's days and weeks where you're stuck in the mire of the details of your business, doing the thing to get the important job done, and you're focused on that, but you're not necessarily working on your business in those moments. You're working in your business. And if you can get to the point where you get that perspective again, that if I just work on my business and make every single thing we touch 1% better this week than I did last week, and I commit to repeat that process again in the future, then the whole system is getting better.
Yeah. And I think that's a key one you brought up too, is working on the business instead of in the business. And I'm sure you've had podcasts about that before too, but
yeah.
the more you can remove yourself as the owner from the day-to-day grind of all the details of stuff and how of actually getting the product done or the service done, and you can remove yourself more from that, and you can concentrate working on the business instead of in the business. Let's go back to the HVAC business. You're an HVAC tech, and you own a business that you repair air conditioners and you install air conditioners. If you're the tech that's out there every single day installing those air conditioners, you might be a great tech and you might have a good living and making yourself a good paycheck, but how far can you really grow that business because you're doing the work?
That's right.
Whereas if you can remove yourself from being in the field as much and you can concentrate on the marketing and the advertising and the growth and the financials and everything that goes on with the business and the systems and things like that, the better the business is going to be, and the bigger that business is going to grow.
Yeah, it's an interesting differentiation too, because there's so many people who, when they start a business, they are the technical person, and they're the technical person who's realized that they're so good at what they do that if they effectively go freelance, they can make 20% more than they're currently making, and suddenly they call themselves a business owner.
And they are.
And they are in some ways. They own a freelance existence that has business elements. They're self-employed. But then a lot of them believe somehow in the back of their brain that it's now their job to scale, yet they have all of the behaviors of a technician still. And the true businesses that scale in any industry, from what I can tell, the technician becomes the business owner and abandons being 100% technician and becomes more like 2% technician. Might keep your finger on the pulse of the industry, but other than that, you're working on your business to make something out of it and hiring people that you look similar to you. They're technicians.
And I think there's many components to it, but two components to that, what you just said, that I think is the most important. And one is learning to be able to delegate that out. Being that guy that's used to being out there doing the tech, yeah, it is. And then you say, okay, I'm gonna grow my business. I'm gonna hire maybe at first I'm gonna hire a part-time tech to handle some of the work, so I can spend more time in the office. But then you're like, oh, are they gonna do it as good as me? Are they gonna da 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 da? I mean, that comes into, you've got to learn to delegate. You got to learn to make sure that you train that person well enough. You got to say, hey, if it's outside of your scope, let me know and I'll help you jump in. But at the end of the day, you've got to be able to delegate, and a lot of people have that problem not delegating. But the other thing to that is that same tech that wants to grow their business, they got to realize that they probably started their own company because they were a pretty good tech. And why were they a good tech? They were a good tech because they had the experience and they probably had some kind of training. And then they got really good. They got the training, they went out and they got the experience, they got really good. They got to the point where like, hey, I can start my own thing. And then they start growing more into a business ownership and trying to grow the business. Well, they're a good tech because they got the training and they got the experience. But then they want to own a business, but they're not willing to realize, they're not willing to realize or put the time in to realize, okay, now I'm a business owner, I need to learn a whole nother set of skills.
Yeah.
And I have to surround myself in a position where I can learn that, and then it's also going to take experience to get better at it. You can't just become a tech and be like, okay, now I know everything about, or I want to grow. Oh, now I know everything about marketing. I know everything about finances. I know everything about administrative. I know all about, you know what I mean? You got to learn it.
Yeah, the learning curve's enormous. And if you think about all of the different aspects, I mean, you mentioned marketing, and you got sales, you've got finance. People go to college for 4+ years to learn each one of those titles, and you've spent how many years as a technician? So you spend a lot of time doing that, and when you make that transition, it should actually be a little scary, because you're walking into something where you likely have almost no training, and you're now abandoning the thing that you were trained in to do something you're untrained in.
Right.
To try to grow other people who are trained in it to do what you were doing, and you have to pay them.
Yes. And you're exactly right. You got this situation like you're going from that sole owner, with no employees, and then you've got up here the businesses that are more established and doing really well, and they're a decent sized company. And when you get to that point, You can hire a marketing person.
Right.
You can hire, a bookkeeper that does, obviously everybody should hire a CPA to do the tax returns, but, the monthly, finances and, even the day-to-day financials, you can't hire, might not be able to, or they have, bookkeepers they can hire, whether they're in-house or out-house. These people you can hire to do it, but between here and here, you might have to do all that stuff to get to yourself. You might be the one that's doing the QuickBooks.
Yeah.
You're the one that's doing the marketing and advertising. You're doing everything. You're doing everything from taking out the garbage to, being the president of the company.
Right.
And everything in between. And I think that's kind of where, that's the hardest part, I think, is getting from that one person thing where you're doing the work and you really don't have anything other than you got a little bit of marketing, but you're mainly just doing your work. Then on the higher end where you can afford to pay people that know a lot more than you, that are specialists in that thing to handle all that work, it's that gap in between that I think is the biggest struggle for business owners.
So I agree. We see so many of our friends, and you and I run in similar circles, and there's a lot of business owners in there, and it's amazing how much we're all doing and how much we're all learning in the trenches in so many ways. How have you seen business owners that you get to know a lot of them? Obviously, it's your job.
You get to know them well too, because I work with them for a long time.
Have you seen or gleaned any data on the habits and behaviors that some of these really talented tactical practitioners of their trade have done to move into that CEO, work on the business, not in the business thing? What is the attitude, or I don't know, what is the habit of somebody that gets them to a level of proficiency?
I think one is the confidence to do it. Having complete confidence in yourself that you can do that. I think a huge part is that you've got to have really good people skills. I think you got to have the good sales skills, and I think that's huge. The personality of the business owner. They've got to be somebody that usually, it can't be that quiet, meek somebody that sits in the corner that typically grows a business. You know what I mean? It's usually somebody that's very outgoing, really likes people, that they're naturally, a sales type person, but I don't mean like in a bad way.
Sure.
You're used
We're
to...
not talking the 1970s used car salesman.
Yeah. I'm just talking, you got a good personality, people like talking with you, people trust you, people, believe you, you're good, that kind of a thing. You need that outgoing kind of a personality, I think, is a big thing. The confidence is a big thing. Being willing to learn, taking the time out to learn, being willing to sacrifice, to make the stuff happen. You hear these business owners are working 15 hours a week, and they're making $500,000, $1 million a year, and they're working 15 hours a week. Well, you know what? They were probably one time working 90, 100 hours a week.
Right.
They invested the time. They did what it took to build that business. And that's kind of the thing, is like a lot of people want to become a business owner because they're like, I want to be able to control my own life. I want to be able to control my own schedule. I want to be able to do this and be able to do that. Typically, some people come right out of the gate and they make that happen. But a lot of times, you're going to go through and you're going to work a lot longer, a lot harder, and make less money when you're a first business owner than when you're self-employed. When you're employed by somebody else.
Well, and maybe even also
sacrifice.
self-employed too. I do think there's a distinction between that talented freelancer who clearly has a cap.
Yeah.
You're going to max out at a certain thing that's probably a little bit better than hourly pay. But then once you want to go past that, that's that wild, wild west moment where it's like all bets are off, and goodbye sleep, and it's an interesting thing to watch that growth trajectory. You almost have to be crazy to do it. There's a certain unbridled confidence. Doesn't mean you have to be a jerk.
Or maybe it's just stupidity.
These days I wonder.
I gotta tell you, my whole adult life, I'm 55 now, and let's just say from 25. So let's say 30 years. I've probably in 30 years worked a total of maybe 3 years where I worked for somebody else and got a salary. And everything else has been self-employed in some way, some fashion. And it is a hard life to live because you're not getting that guaranteed paycheck week in and week out.
Yeah.
You can't sit there sometimes and build a budget and say, okay, these are my expenses and I know this money's coming in. Sometimes you're like, I don't know when my money's coming in. Or you live the peaks and valleys, you're not making any money, and then you make a lot of money, and then you don't make a lot of money, and you got all these peaks and valleys. So it is maybe a little bit of stupidity too.
It might be, but I mean, we're laughing about it though,
Right.
because I think there's a certain something about entrepreneurship, no matter how hard it is, that you love it, and maybe you're glutton for punishment. I don't know. For me, I couldn't imagine life any other way.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat. I'm 43. I've been an entrepreneur since 1984. I was 4 years old when I started my first business. I kid you not.
No, I used to sell popcorn and magic
Right.
shows, and I was always
this is
doing
it.
that stuff.
This is, look at that.
Yeah.
As a little dude, you're running around selling your wares. I had a manufacturing concern in 1984 as a 4-year-old, and I was $1,600 a year cash positive.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we were dealing. We were doing real good, and I literally, that's the life I live. And so since my last paycheck from somebody that wasn't me was 21 years ago.
Wow.
And I had 2 years of it. I had 2 years of it. And I can't imagine life any other way. And I think so there's a personality type. There is somebody that gravitates towards it, and it's not self-harm. I like this. I want this.
Josh, it's so funny because I think that is a large part of it. Like, because I was the same thing. I remember being in grade school and riding around the neighborhood. I'd make popcorn and ride around the neighborhood selling bags of popcorn.
Awesome.
The kids. I used to, I don't know. And it's not just, I used to do a lot of lawns. And I remember me and my friend, when we were about 13, 14 years old, we used to paint the address numbers on people's sidewalk.
Oh yeah,
So-
right. Yeah.
So we'd have a template. We'd put down a thing. We'd spray the thing white, and then we'd pull that up and put the numbers down there for the address and paint it black, and then there would be white and black. And,
Yeah.
and it would be funny. We figured out sales at a really early age. One of us would sit down across the street and sit somebody's curb that didn't pay for it yet, and they would act like they were painting. And the other one of us would be on the other side of the street, knocking on the door and go, "Hey, yes, me and my friend are in the neighborhood today. We're painting address numbers on the thing for you and your friends." And we'd point back like that, and their neighbor would be like, "Oh, okay, the Smiths are getting it done. Yeah, how much is it? $3. Okay, $3. We could do. Oh my God, we used to make $25 an hour, and this is like in the mid '80s. You know what I mean?
That's phenomenal.
As teenagers,
Oh my God.
tax free. Well, not tax free.
This is wood, right?
But I think that you're right. I think that a lot of business owners, it's kind of been ingrained in them for a long time, being business owners.
That's fun. I like that. Yeah. I was going door to door selling homemade key racks.
Really?
Yep. My mom kept losing her keys, and my friend's mom, she always found her keys. Why? She had a key rack. So I solved the problem. Gave my mom a gift.
There you go.
Yep. And then my grandfather insisted I learn how to mass manufacture. He said, "Don't make key rack, make key racks." And so he taught me how to make key racks.
How old were you?
4.
Oh, you were 4.
Yeah. He's had me on a radial arm saw and a drill press at 4 years old.
Oh my gosh. That's great. That's great.
I have all of my digits. I'm okay. But that's how I was making my money as a little guy. My parents still owe me money. They used to borrow. They used to borrow from me when I was a little guy. I would keep a book like a Shylock. I was just like, yeah, you're into me for $65, Mom. Yeah,
I want it. When are you gonna pay? You're gonna get interest here,
My grandfather actually was teaching me about interest. He was my bank. So my seed money, I actually had to pay back to him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you've got kids and you're going to teach them anything about business, be the bank, loan them the money. And maybe don't charge them interest. Maybe warn them that interest could be a thing. So, mom and dad don't have to do that. But make them pay you back. It's a really good lesson that you owe the bank.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. So, hey, I've got more questions for you. A couple of things. One, financing is always a concern for any business. But the idea that somebody would buy a business, I would imagine they're not always cash deals. Sometimes maybe an equity group has the money, it's already in a fund, so they're gonna stroke a check and be done.
Kind of. They usually have investors that are behind them that they have calls and stuff. That's a whole other story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
But you're right. Like a lot of times, most of the time, there's a lender involved. I mean, it depends. Like a business is going to sell for $50,000 or $100,000, for instance. And I'm talking in very general terms. It really depends on the business and the geographical area and the type of business and stuff. So, but a business is going to sell for 50 to 100 grand, which I don't sell. They're going to typically either be an all cash deal with no lending, or a lot of times the seller is going to self finance portion of that for the buyer.
Got it.
So I'd say, I'm going to sell you my business for $75,000. Put 50% down, give me 50%, finance the other 50%.
Got it. So they're holding the paper.
Yes. And then, obviously you're going to get a personal guarantor on that, and you're going to have lien against all the furniture, fixtures, and equipment of the business. It's easier to do. I sell much bigger businesses, but I try to stay away from the seller financing at all. And when there is seller financing, I want to make sure that there's enough hard assets, especially vehicles, things that are titled, that you have to report to the state.
Yep.
That you can put liens on. And they can't be resold with that lien on.
Property too, maybe?
So exactly. So you get those kind of assets you can tie to it, then the seller can at least, that's a good situation. When you get into the bigger businesses, let's say businesses are going to sell for typically $400,000 or $500,000 to $5 million. We're going to be looking at SBA loans. And by the way, that's the space that I work in. That's my space. I usually sell businesses. They're going to sell for a couple $1 million. And 95% of those, probably more than that, are above the buyers are getting the SBA loan. So the buyer puts 10% down, and the bank gives the seller 90%, and it's financed over 10 years.
Okay.
And then you get into the much bigger businesses. It depends on different situations. You can have private equity groups like we were talking about before. And a lot of times with private equity groups, they have investors, and the investors are already lined up, and usually the investors will invest again and again and again. But if they want to be part of the private equity group, I don't want to know what you want to call it, but like the group, they're going to say, hey, you have to be willing to donate, or not donate, but to invest, let's say $500,000 by such and such date, or you will no longer be able to have the opportunities moving forward, something like that. Every private equity group's a little bit different, but then they reach out to maybe 20 different of these investors, or how many numbers there are, and they put the money in. And obviously there's private equity that's self-funded too, and but that's not, just so that's not my world.
Sure.
Like I sell businesses. I consider there's you were talking about M&A earlier.
Yeah.
So there's Main Street business brokers. Main Street business brokers are usually businesses that are going to sell under $1 million, but it's not really a price so much. But let's just use that as a rule of thumb. And then you got M&A transactions, and M&A transactions might be $5 million or more. I work kind of in between those two, so I consider myself an upper Main Street business broker.
Got it.
So
Jim, I feel like we're hitting a lot of like the philosophy of business. We're also hitting a lot of, the tactical important stuff about, what it would mean to sell a business, get a business into good versus bad condition. Good mindset stuff, by the way. I get into mindset.
Yeah, I like that too. I enjoy that too.
Yeah, the ego version of entrepreneurship versus that humility of knowing you don't know everything.
Right.
I've got a degree in philosophy. I don't know if you knew.
Oh,
this.
you did?
I do. Yeah, and my favorite stories come from Plato's, writings about Socrates, and there's this old story about how Socrates went to the top of the mountain. The mountain is Delphi. And the Oracle of Delphi was at the top of the mountain. And so he went to the Oracle and he asked to know what the meaning of life was. And in Greek, he said, gnothi suauton. And gnothi suauton is to know thyself.
I don't know Greek, but it sounds like you pronounced that very well, by the way.
Thank you. Yes. It's been a long time. It's entirely possible it's completely wrong. And somebody's going to be like, you're swearing on your show. So it's know thyself. And so the way Plato's character.
Oh, that's what it means. Is know
thyself. Yes.
Okay.
And so Plato took that, or Socrates, his character took it to mean, the one thing I know is that I know nothing. And then if you extrapolate or expand upon that, is in the knowable, in the universe of knowledge, what I could possibly know pales in comparison to what could be known. Therefore, humility is my only option.
Wow.
And I've always liked that because, and if you know me, I'm a pretty confident dude. And so can I handle it? Hell yes. Do I know how to handle it? I might, but there's a good chance I might not. And therefore I must learn.
It's really good.
And yeah, and I think there's a lot of business owners who would do well to be a little Socratic in that notion of gnothi suauton. The one thing I know is that I know nothing, because I know myself well enough to know that I'm so human that I couldn't know it all.
That's really good, Josh.
Thanks.
That's pretty cool that you live by that. And that socks guy sounds pretty smart.
Yeah, actually,
I knew who Socrates is. No, I'm kidding.
It would
I'm
be
kidding.
great is I've always wanted SNL to do a sketch with a whole bunch of socks that are Socrates, or have Plato come on to teach something, and then he realized Socrates is actually a sock puppet Socrates, and do the whole thing tongue in cheek with sock puppets. It's unwritten right now. It's just an idea in my head, but just the idea that Socrates was actually crazy Plato's sock puppet, it rings well for me. But way back in our conversation, you mentioned that you used to own a business and that you'd learned some issues with Band-Aids and stuff. And one of the things that I wish I knew about you, and actually, in all the times we've hung out, I've never asked, is I knew you owned a business prior. I have no clue what you guys did. I didn't know you had business partners. So there's a story there that I don't know. But then, of course, eventually you transitioned out of owning that business to founding and operating the Boss Group as a business broker. And so what is the old business? What do you guys do? And what's the There to Hear story?
Wow. Okay. So great. Yeah. So, Josh, I owned a wedding videography company. The later we added photography and tuxedos to it. So we did wedding photography, wedding video, and tuxedos.
That's the one type of videography I stay away from.
Really?
Yeah.
So I want to tell you a funny story about the tuxedos if we have time. But anyways, we owned that company. My major in college was communications, and I was doing television production. And I moved to Orlando, Florida, and I came across somebody, and anyways, I ended up becoming a partner of this wedding videography company. The office was probably 8 feet by 8 feet. They had access to broadcast quality equipment, but they didn't know how to use it. They were not trained in it. And I came with this training, and they hired me to do some piecework. After a while, they realized I was like the only one who knew how to use the equipment properly. I mean, they had been using it, but they weren't using it properly. It was broadcast quality equipment. Some of these cameras were $20,000, which was a lot then.
Sure.
I mean, it's a lot now, but that was a lot then. And I showed them how to use it. And anyways, I ended up becoming business partners with them, and we grew that from a little tiny. We rented like an 8 foot by 8 foot place in the back of a tuxedo shop to having a really large location here in Orlando. I mean, I think we had 4,000 square feet in Orlando.
Wow.
And then we had an office in Las Vegas. We had an office in Hawaii. We had 35 employees. It was pretty big. We were doing, I think, close to 2.5 million. And that 2.5 million in gross sales, that was in the 90s.
Oh, no kidding.
So it was a pretty good operation. So we grew it pretty big. And for a decent size. When I was a young kid, I mean, I shouldn't say young. I wasn't a kid.
You were 20s, right?
Yeah, I was in my 20s. Yeah. So I mean, it grew pretty big. But ended up happening was that 80% of our clients were Japanese, and so we on September 11th, the day after September 11th, the Prime Minister of Japan came out and told his people, do not fly to the United States. Prime Minister of Japan said, do not fly to the United States. So, Josh, overnight, it was just, our business was crushed. Our fax machine was running, so funny to say fax machine.
So for those young people.
What a fax machine is.
Yeah, the sheet of paper comes out of the phone. I kid you not, it's really a thing.
Our fax machine was ringing off the hook with canceled orders. We couldn't call them up and say, "I'll give you a better service. We'll give you a better product. We'll cut the price."
It was non-negotiable.
It was gone. It was gone. I mean, our business was gone. I mean, it was just, and our overhead the 20% that was not Japanese, I mean, you can't float that kind of overhead that we had at that time. And it was like the most horrible part of my life. I would spend the mornings calling up every single person, or all the companies, I should say, that owed us money. And they were struggling because they weren't having new clients. I'd be like, okay, so you owe us $15,000. Like, how much can you pay? When can you pay it? And I would sit there. That would be my calls all morning, calling everybody that owes money. And then in the afternoon, I would call all the people that we owed money to and say, okay, I'm expecting X amount of money that I can send you on this date and that date. Those were my days for like 2 or 3 months. Everybody was cool though. You know what I mean? Like, I was cool to them. The people that owed us money and the people we owed money to were cool to me, because it's communicating. It's about communicating. And you got to remember, this was right after September 11th, and
the world was very different for a good couple of months.
I mean, it was kind of like all of us kind of just everybody, my suppliers and my clients, everybody, we were all in the same position.
Yeah.
So that was my time, and I realized very quickly that I did not want to that the business was just not going to make it. I mean, at the same time, we had, we had one of those big printing machines that you see in Walgreens or CVS. You see those big machines, and we were financing one. I forget how much it was worth, but it was like $300,000 or $400,000. We were actually gonna, on September 11th, we were supposed to get a new one, an upgrade, which obviously we canceled that appointment. But what had happened at the same time was we had one of those big, huge printers. It was $300,000 or $400,000 that we were financing. We had tons and tons of still cameras that were 35 millimeter. What was happening at the time was, experiencing all the September 11th fallout with the Japanese, we were also experiencing a situation where digital photography was coming in. And so we had outdated equipment, and we weren't a sole photographer where we'd be like, okay, I'm going to go out and buy a new digital camera. We had a lot of equipment that we would need to replace. So it would have been a huge investment. So those two things together kept compiling, and I saw the writing on the wall. And at the time, I was married to my first wife, and I had a baby, and my wife was pregnant with another baby. She did not work. I was a sole bread earner, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I did not like what I majored in anymore. It wasn't my thing anymore.
Sure.
I fell in love with business, but I loved business. But I was like, no corporation's going to hire me. I mean, I'm not trained to be an accountant, or I'm not trained to do this, I'm not trained to do that. And so I ran into a friend, and my friend was very successful at selling residential real estate. He was, why don't you get your real estate license? I'm like, okay, might as well. I don't have to go back to school for that long.
What state were you in right now?
Florida.
Okay. Well, interestingly, everybody in Florida at some point, by law, has to have a real estate license.
Have to have a real estate license.
Yeah.
You come into the state of Florida as a resident, they're like they'd stop you and they go, okay, when do you plan to get your real estate license?
Kind of.
But I did not want to sell houses. Yeah. I just was not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just I didn't see myself being like, oh, look at the foyer, or look at this, or it just wasn't me. But I looked at it and said, I can get licensed pretty quick. The income potential is not capped. You can make as much as you apply yourself to, and that always appealed to me. And I thought I'd be pretty good at it.
Yeah.
And so I went to real estate school, and I'm in real estate school, and the instructor talks literally out of 72 hours. He talks about business brokerage for 30 seconds. I think he said 3 sentences. And I was like, what? What is that? And I ran up to him on break, and I'm like, what's this business brokerage thing? He goes, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. And so
you're like, hell yes, I do.
So I get out of real estate school, and I went to work for the same company. I went to interview with the same company, my friend that told me to get my real estate license, where he hung his license at. And in that interview, the gentleman goes, well, Jim, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I was just being honest. I said, well, honestly, I I was very honest and ethical. You know, if I didn't know something about the brokerage portion of itself, I would seek out the knowledge, and I was lucky enough to hook up with a couple of really good mentors. And just, from there, it was fast forward 23 years later, here I am.
Wow.
That's probably a longer story than you wanted to hear.
No, it's incredible though. It's always interesting to me because the entrepreneurial life and journey is there's so many similarities between different stories, yet they're so unique. Mm-hmm. And and I've been interviewing people long enough now to have run into a lot of September 11th stories.
Really?
Yeah. My friend Randy Lowe. Randy, hi. You need to come on the show, by the way. Randy, his first day in business was September 11th, 2011.
Wow.
He had ramped up to this big grand reveal. He owns still Lo and Behold, which is a flower company and an event staging company. He does a whole bunch of really cool things. And he had like $100,000 worth of florals for this one event at the Bob Carr Theater. And then September 11th happens, and they're all locked in the theater dying because everything was shut down. And so by the time he got back to the theater for the canceled event, he had $100,000 in dead product. That was day one of his business.
Wow.
Should have shut him down. Should have been permanent. Should have been the death knell. And he's an amazing human who was committed to his future. And he found a way and built a wonderful multi-million-dollar business that is also ethical and treats people great, and he's got a cool family, and he's built a great life. And so I hear your story now, another September 11th story that's tied to, interestingly, the seed to your big pivot to growing Boss Group, which is just an awesome business doing really cool things. And we just had the pandemic, and it occurs to me that in my story I didn't have September 11th. I was in college. Mm-hmm. But in my business, in the pandemic, I had a day where we had $550,000 in cancellations in 3 hours.
Wow.
That was going to be our biggest year. It was going to push us probably to the first time we were going to hit a 7-figure for my business. And over half of our booked work disappeared in 3 hours, never to return. And what's, pat my own back here for a second, we bootstrapped. We pulled up our bootstraps and we decided we were going to figure it out. And instead of, saying close this up and go get a job, we righted the ship, figured some things out, started experimenting with new retainer models, and now our business is what it is today because we got all those cancellations. I'm happier, healthier, with a better business that's got a greater future because of the crisis that hit. And so it occurs to me that all of these really great stories they're inspiring. You're inspiring because you had an expertise that you brought to a business and became a partner, not an employee. Lesson. You grew it to multiples of cities. Inspiring. It crumbled because of something completely out of your control, but you communicated well and told the truth to people through the whole thing. Ethics. Inspiring. And then you found your way to what's probably a really true calling, and helping people buy, sell and buy businesses as a broker who you didn't know anything about it, but you said, I can do it, which I love. Inspiring. So I just look at your story and so many of these other stories and go, there's hope, right?
Josh, you really put that in a nice way. I never looked at it that way. Thank you.
Yeah, no, so thank you for sharing it. Some people will go, you don't want to hear that, and then they want to move on.
Yeah.
And I just really appreciate your openness.
I feel like this. I feel like the era that I grew up in, Rocky was a huge movie back then. I'm not saying it's my favorite movie, but
culturally it's the thing, though.
But it resembles my life. It resembles. I feel like looking back, it resembles my life in a lot of ways. You get punched in the face, and you keep moving forward, and you keep getting punched in the face, and sometimes you fall down, and you get back up, and you swing back, you get knocked down, and I think that's life. Yeah. And you just got to keep getting up, and you got to keep swinging. I think there's very few business owners that start a business, everything goes perfect, and they do really well financially, and they have all the time in the world, and they live happily ever after. It's a fight.
Yeah.
And it's a constant fight. And I don't mean fight in a negative sense, but it's that struggle, and it's getting back up, and it's the people that can't get back up. That's a separation.
Yep.
If you're out there and you're listening to this and you own a business now and you're struggling, I don't obviously know your situation. You're going to have to figure out how to get out of that. But I can tell you this. To be successful, you got to get up off the mat, and you got to start swinging back.
Chumbawamba had it right. Remember that song, Tub Thumping? Do you remember this?
No.
I'll get knocked down. I'll get back up again. You're never going to keep me down. And they just keep repeating it. And
Yep.
now, for any of you who know it, one, I'm sorry, I butchered it. Two, it's stuck in your head, isn't it? Yeah.
And those of you guys that are too young for Rocky would have blood coming down his face, just pouring down his face. And he would get up, and he'd be like, ah.
Right.
And just keep swinging.
Keep swinging.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
One more thing. Another thing I just think is about life too is, and this is an overused analogy, but it's so true, is, when you're going through life, I never knew I was going to be a business broker. I think most of us, you didn't know what you said. You didn't know what you were going to do.
Oh, heck no.
You never know where life's going to take you, and somehow you end up where you genuinely feel like you're supposed to be in life.
Yeah.
And the only way you make that happen is when you have doors in front of you, open up the damn doors and go through the door. Yeah. And you know what? It might be a wrong door, and it may not be where you're supposed to be, but it'll lead to another door.
Or you climb out the window.
Or you climb out the window. You just keep going. Keep opening up doors. Keep going down paths. You just standing still, standing stagnant, you're not going to get anywhere in life. And you know what? I would rather go like this through life. If this is point A and this is point B and this is where I'm supposed to be and this is where I'm at right now, I'd rather go like this than just stay right there.
Oh, yeah. And honestly, if nothing else, it's boring.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't want to live a boring life, but it's so much more rewarding when you try.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even if you get knocked down.
Yeah. Just don't punch me.
Yeah, you got it. So this has been an inspirational thing. If you're catching any of the shorts on the internet right now where you're like, gee, what are they talking about? You need to go find the whole episode. You're going to learn so much about what it means to have a good, healthy business. And I promise you, if you listen to the end, you are going to be inspired through and through. Entrepreneur, you need to watch this whole episode twice. I'm Josh Pies. This is the Bootstrapped Unicorns podcast. That is Jim Parker, my dear friend, who is now your business brokerage mentor and guide. You need to sell your business, you call Jim. You're going to be back on the show.
Thank you.
You have to. And then on top of that, Jim has a great YouTube channel that will be growing exponentially in 24. He's actually working with us, and it's going to blow up. So you need to go find Jim Parker, Business Broker, and follow all of the things. It's going to be really important if you're on an entrepreneurial journey. Again, I'm Josh Pies. This is the Bootstrapped Unicorns podcast. Do I know who's coming up on the next episode? I never know, but I promise you it's going to be a great person who's going to inspire you to be better today and hopefully give you those tactical, practical things like Jim just did to help you actually have tools to move forward. Until then, go do something great and definitely don't stop moving. You have to keep moving. You have to keep trying. It is absolutely your entrepreneurial mandate.